Hey folks, your
Absolute Packer podcast initiating in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello out there in Packer Nation, and welcome to Absolute Packer Podcast number 24. And this, we are going to dissect the 2018 NFL Draft with respect to the Packers, and we'll touch on a little bit of the NFC North and how it pertains to the division as well. But that's what we got on store today. It's a beautiful Sunday evening in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and let's check in with Elliot and Jeremy. How you guys? Oh, there's a peanut gallery. That's my Ed McMahon. What's up, guys?
Oh, not much, buddy. Not much.
Well, that's no good.
Well,
and
not
he just talked up how awesome everything is, and you're just like, yeah, it's all good. It's fine. I'm just here.
I'm just downplaying it so that when we get into the real bread and butter of things,
yeah, he's just getting ready. He's just boiling up all this anger. It's beneath the surface now. I mean, no, I think we can hop right into it. Oh, somebody just fell into a well. Oh my goodness! So now we're gonna have like some kind of shock jock radio program or something.
Whatever. I have to have a part in this somewhere.
Well, that's fine. Alrighty, so the draft happened, as you boys know, and like anything, I don't know what you guys think, but it seems like every year, obviously, the hype up to it gets worse and worse and worse. And by worse and worse and worse, I mean, have you ever seen ad nauseum so many mock drafts, beating things to death, disinformation, this, that, or the other? And I know it's been going on, but every year it gets even worse.
Oh, I agree. I mean, ESPN, NFL Network had one on once a week, literally for about 6 or 7 weeks straight. And it got to the point where they each were playing the GM for each team, and they would make the pick. That's how in depth they got, and it just got nauseating. Really did.
They have a bunch of hours to fill. You know what else? What do you expect?
True.
No doubt. I mean, the NFL's king, but it's like the guys like who's the big guy? Mel Kiper Jr. Oh, the guy is nauseating. I mean, what is their batting average? It's like they get maybe 1 of 32 picks right, but they have this huge lead up, for months and months and months. And Todd McShay might be the other one. And the other guy I'm missing. Mortensen. There's one other guy. I can't remember his name. He's got kind of a lisp or something when he talks. He's pretty good. But his name is escaping me. But there's kind of like this holy trinity of talking heads about draft. But
Right.
Anyway, let's hop into it. So Packers, they were picking at the highest position with respect to the first round in, I guess, since 2009, right? When they drafted B.J. Raji and Clay Matthews. They had the 14th overall selection going in. They had an army of compensatory picks. I mean, they had a ton of picks to wield. If my memory serves me correct, I want to say total, including the compensatories, they had 12 picks, which was the most in the draft to start out. It was either the most or it was tied with the most.
It was the most.
Yeah, they definitely had a lot of ammunition to get going. And like anything, goes on the clock, and then every Packers sit there. And this is obviously, we should also mention, it's the first draft for Brian Gutekunst, which I have. I'm going to coin him, and I'm going to gloss him Goody from here on out, so we don't have to sit there and butcher his name all the time. But this was the first draft without Ted Thompson since 2005. As everybody knows, in the last podcast we talked about the transition out of that. So this was Brian Gutekunst's first draft, Goody. So as the anticipation builds, what did you guys think was going to happen at when the 14th pick came? Truth be told, I wasn't even watching the draft. I was doing on some cycling event going on, and I was kind of watching on the phone here and there. But what did you guys think was going to happen? Did you think they were going to pick? They're going to trade out or trade up? Or I'm just curious.
No, I didn't think they were going to trade any. The only time that they were going to trade was to go up. But as soon as the Bears took Roquan Smith, then I knew they were pretty much going to stand pat because nobody else was going to trade out because everybody had their guy below them. So to trade back, I didn't.
You were pleased as punch, weren't you?
To sugarcoat it, yeah. I did not see that coming.
Jeremy was not a fan.
No. And here's my reasoning behind that. Because I understand they got the guy they wanted. That's great. But so you get a 2019 first round draft pick, and everybody keeps on talking about, oh, they stole that from them. Well, realizing as they got through the rest of the draft to get back up and trade to get Oren Brooks, they traded their third rounder. So in a sense, they only got a 5th round draft pick this year, and they got the first rounder next year. So this team was so hard up for talent, so hard up for guys that can make plays in the ball, which when they were sitting at 14, you had Derwin James, you had Tremaine Edmonds. I wasn't a big fan of Marcus Davenport because he wasn't the guy that was going to contribute right away.
And that's who the Saints actually came up and picked in front of them, right? At the 14th pick.
You're right. Yeah, they wanted him.
That's interesting. That seemed kind of a reach.
It did, but they have time to develop him. I mean, they are a Super Bowl ready team, so where the Packers, they need guys that can step in right now, and they don't have that. So I don't think that he would have been a good pick in that respect because he would not have contributed right away. And you want your first rounders to contribute right away.
Yep.
You want to get your best value from those guys. So I'm not a fan of the whole trade back. I mean, I like the trade back, but as soon as they came back in the third round to get Burks, they got rid of their third rounder, and they only recouped a 5th rounder this year. For how much they need, it just does not. Worrying about next year does not help them this year.
I definitely agree with that. I mean, and I'll go on record for saying that, when I learned the details of what Gutekunst got, and that was a 1st round pick in 2019 from the Saints, obviously it doesn't help us this year, but I have to say, when confronted with that, I don't blame him for taking that. Now, could that pick be, if the Saints go to the Super Bowl, it could be a 32nd pick, but if they have 2 first rounders, that's good to get a first rounder out of it. To your point, it's not going to do anything for them this year. The only guy or guys that I really, I didn't know a ton about the draft this year. There was kind of the I'll call it the short list of impact player names, whether it was offense and defense. A lot of people were mocking Derwin James to the Packers, but he was a safety, was he not?
Yes.
And, I don't want to say the Packers are completely set at safety, but he kind of would have been another guy potentially where they drafted him. He's a great player, but if they would have drafted him and shoved him at another position where he's not meant to play, like they try to make him to convert him to cornerback or something, I would have been pissed, So in a weird way, it's like I realize the talent there, but they did that with Randall. Demarius Randall gets drafted and he played safety, and they converted him to cornerback, and that went over like a fart in church, as we all know. So now he's sitting in Cleveland. But the only guy I really wanted based on what I saw and based on their need was Ward. Was it Denzel Ward?
Right.
I think it was, but he was like a top 3, top 4. So you weren't going to get him unless you traded up.
Yes.
And if you're not going to trade up, then you have to kind of sit what's there. So as I look at it, I don't know a ton about Jair Alexander. He looks like he's got some experience. He seems to be pretty good. Again, he's a rookie. How many rookie cornerbacks make a difference? The one, I'll call it red flag, that seems to be there right away is, it brings up the old Terrell Buckley. He's short. He's like 5'10" and a half, and that's like if he's got, high-heeled shoes on or something like that. So they're kind of stretching this requirement for him, because I guess it goes back to the Ron Wolf rule, where after he drafted Terrell Buckley in 92, he said, I'm not going to draft a cornerback who's shorter than 5'10" or 5'11" anymore. So they kind of, might have reneged on that. But the guy apparently has ball skills. He's got athleticism galore, and he can maybe even return punts. So that seems pretty good. But I think we should obviously preface this too, that without question, you can't evaluate this draft until basically the end of next year. You just can't.
Right.
We'll see, again, the pick from the Saints, I think is going to be good, but you're right. It doesn't help this year. And they had a litany of needs. They didn't even really draft a pass rusher, and you could argue they needed a pass rusher more than they needed a cornerback. But again, here they go again. First 2 picks are cornerbacks. It seems like they've been doing that every year since, the past 5 years.
Yeah, I didn't. The whole trading back. I think I don't know. I feel worse. I feel like more. I was more bothered by that, I think, than maybe you guys were.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that is, for lack of a better term, there, and it feels like they're punting. They're punting into next year already. I mean, we don't have any guarantee on Aaron Rodgers or anything else. As a fan, I'm all about this year, and it could be all over by next year. So I'm a little less bullish. But there again, I don't know these player names, And sometimes, the biggest college guys end up fizzling.
Mhm.
Right.
I don't get too bent out of shape one way or the other, really, but it's just the symbolism of it.
Yeah.
I feel like we're not being aggressive enough.
I hear you. It did kind of reek when I got back from the cycling thing and I checked my phone and the alerts and you guys and some other people. I was like, oh, this reeks of Ted. This is what Ted would do. Now that was just one pick, but still it was kind of like, and I can only imagine the rest of Packer Nation was groaning about it. But why don't we move on to the next pick, which happened to be a cornerback too. Josh Jackson out of Iowa. He's a bigger guy. I don't know a whole lot about him. I think he played one full year of cornerback at Iowa, and he had a really good game versus Ohio State in that blowout. But past that, I don't know a whole lot about him. I know that Jeremy, he had mentioned that you watched some film, and you're kind of the go-to guy in my mind for APP when it comes to really getting into the nuts and bolts of how these players play and how they can project.
Jackson also had a great game against Wisconsin.
That's right. You're right. He
In
did.
fact, he was the whole team. He had 2 interception returns for touchdowns, and I think they scored 14 points total in that game, and he accounted for all of them. You're right. He only.
And he's strictly outside. Is he a strictly outside corner, or could he play slot too? Or
He played outside predominantly at Iowa, and he doesn't have the hips and the speed and the quick twitchness like Jair does to play in the slot.
Mhm.
To play in the slot, you have to be very quick,
Yeah.
because you're dealing with very quick receivers. So I don't think he translates there well, but where he does translate well is we don't have a cornerback that can make plays on the ball. He can. And 26 or 27 passes defense last year, 8 interceptions. Yeah, he only had 1 year. He's a 1-year wonder, if you want to call him that. But that tells me right there that guy can make plays, and we need that.
Yeah.
We need guys that can just change games, and those are game-changing plays. When you can have 8 interceptions and you can return 2 passes for touchdowns or interceptions for touchdowns, I mean, those are game-changing plays that this team needs. So he's a ball player. He makes plays on the ball, and he was predominantly off the ball. He wasn't like man up, where he was on the line of scrimmage and getting physical.
Okay. He wasn't zone. Did they play zone or did they play man?
I think they played more of like a cover 2 where they played, back 5-10 yards, and they were
But he wasn't playing a lot of press man.
not a lot that I saw. No.
Okay.
But he did play it, and when he did, receivers were getting pushed back, and they were not getting, off the ball real quickly. So that's something that Pettin loves. His MO on defense is he wants great cover corners so that he can scheme great blitzing schemes around the zone.
That's a good point.
And I know we were talking about they did not have, or I should say I have been talking about it too, but besides Matthews and Perry, they don't have any outside linebackers.
Well, they got Kyler Fackrell, excuse me.
Oh, please. And Reggie Gilbert. Woo!
Dead silence. We're going to have to come up with a voice or some kind of audio zinger for that, Elliot. I don't know what the Kyler Fackrell is going to have to be sad trombone, I guess. I don't know.
In Pettin's scheme, he likes pressure coming up from the middle. So he likes his linemen to get a lot of pressure so that he can scheme zone blitzes around them.
Yeah, you forget that, Pettin, when he was the defensive coordinator and the Jets, he was working with Darrelle Revis, the best corner in the game in his prime.
Right.
And I know he also was he with Rex Ryan and the Bills too for one season?
For one season.
And I don't know who their corners were, but they were good too. I mean, Rex Ryan knows it even if he's not directly running it. Pettin was his guy. So that's a good point. I keep forgetting that the Packers still have Kevin King, who's essentially, you could say he's not a rookie anymore, but he kind of still is. He was hurt a lot, but he was tall, 6'2", maybe not quite as, is King, here's where I'm going. Is King a lot like Josh Jackson on paper too, in terms of measurables and what they can do? Seems to be.
Very, very comparable,
Okay.
Where I think when Washington, they had Sidney Jones, who's now the cornerback for the Philadelphia Eagles. And last year he didn't play because he hurt his knee, I think it was. But at Washington, they played a very similar scheme like Pettin likes to play, where their cornerbacks were press covering up on the line and getting their hands on the receivers, and try to disrupt their flow.
Okay.
That's what they're projecting with him here. And I think he projects out well here because the few times they did play last year, he did play on the ball, and he was very physical, and he stopped a lot of routes, within the first few seconds. And that's huge because the NFL today is timing. So that is huge.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, he on paper he seems like a pretty good pick too. I don't have any problem with that. The fact that they had to pick 2 corners back to back again, it sucks. But it seems like these look like they've got some good corners. This isn't like drafting Demarius Randall and then Quentin Rollins, 2 guys who basically didn't play any football and were playing out of position. But we don't have to get into that.
Right, and these guys played cornerback where Demarius Randall was a safety. So they drafted.
And Quentin Rollins was like a cricket player, or no? I'm just kidding. That's not fair to him. But he was. I think he played one season. He was more like a basketball player.
One season.
To your point, it's like these guys weren't seasoned guys playing these positions in college. They were just athletes.
Yeah, he played basketball for, I think it was Kent State, wasn't it? We drafted guys, and the thing with this year's draft is it was not very heavy on the pass rushing side of it. It was very top heavy on the cornerback. So they went with what was there, what was deep. And I mean, let's admit it, before we go into the draft, their number one need was a cornerback, and they filled it.
Yeah. No, I agree. And they kind of doubled down, which is fine. So next guy on here is Oren Burks. We were talking just before we started recording that. This guy is one of the most intriguing to me. And I'll say, the first thing I noticed when they drafted him was, okay, it took Brian Gutekunst, or Goody, shall we say, it took him 1 draft to undo every philosophy and, kind of way that Ted treated inside linebacker. Ted, as I like to say, he was obsessed with try hard, stiff white guys. I mean, he just that was his MO with that kind of position and those kind of players, the AJ Hawks, the Jake Ryans, the guys who are, their ceiling is not extremely high. They're solid players at best. We needed a guy with speed at inside linebacker, being able to rove all over the place and potentially cover on 3rd down. And this guy, Oren Burks, seems to fit that mold.
Right. Of all the draft picks, he kind of is that sleeper guy because the ceiling is really high because he has great physical traits. I mean, he runs like a 4.59. He's just physically athletically gifted. His production wasn't real good at Vanderbilt, but in the tape that I saw of him, and I think we were just talking about this too before the show, he was diagnosing these screenplays and cutting them out before the ball.
That's great. Because did you see the Packers, and I'll use air quotes, even though it's radio, try to defend screens last year? I'd never seen a team on any level, whether it's college, peewee, pro, they didn't know what a screen pass was and how to defend it. It was abysmal last year. So that's good.
Yeah. And he's a sideline to sideline guy. So he's going to fit that mold of the anti-Andy, where he's a stiff white dude. He's not that at all. He is a guy that can fly around, and he played safety when he first started out. He's a pretty quick guy. If he can play safety, he has to be pretty fast. And he transferred over to inside linebacker the last 2 years he played there. And he was fairly productive. But, the thing I saw with him was just phenomenal speed, and we don't have that. And he's going to fill that need there.
Okay. Excellent. Yeah, I don't think there's much else we could say there. He should be a good pick. I think he'll contribute a lot on special teams, I imagine, to start. But, in training camp, I have to imagine he's going to be, they'll want him. They'll give him every opportunity to be the 3rd down inside linebacker if he's out there. So, all right. Next pick. Jamon Moore, wide receiver out of Missouri. And, full disclosure, I don't know a ton about these wide receivers. I know a couple about some about these other players, but the wide receivers in particular, I don't know a whole lot about them. This guy played in the SEC, played at Missouri, and I'm just telling you what I know and what I read, briefly about him. But apparently he only played on one side of the field. From what I saw, they didn't flip sides. He's got talent, but I don't know what you got on him. The Packers. Real quick, sorry. The Packers need wide receivers. We know that. And they drafted, 3 wide receivers in this draft, and all of them appear to have speed. But as anybody can know, we have to put this out there. The Packers in this scheme with Mike McCarthy, rookie wide receivers don't make big impacts. If people are expecting even one of these guys to put up anything more than a few hundred yards and maybe a couple touchdowns this year, you're dreaming. Because Greg Jennings, who was one of their all-time great receivers, look at his rookie stats. I don't want to say they're pedestrian, but they're damn close. And he's an all-time great receiver for the Packers. And the list goes all the way back.
But is anybody expecting that, though?
I think a fair amount of people, and the Packers may say this publicly, but they can't be serious about it. Because let's look at the depth chart. Right now, you got Devontae Adams on the left side, who's one hit away from having his career being over. But he's their best threat, and he's a good receiver without a doubt. He improved. Now in the slot, you got Randall Cobb, who's I'd say he's descending, but he's solid. Now, so those are your top two wide receivers. Only one true outside threat. On the other side, the next guy you got is Geronimo Allison, and I don't care who says what. Geronimo Allison going into training camp, if they expect him to make some big jump and be like a threat as a number two, it ain't happening. He has the trust of Rodgers. It's great, but he's slow and he's a fringe guy, so they need another threat. Now they have Jimmy Graham, and a lot of people are saying, well, he's a tight end, but they're going to use him as a wide receiver, but still, in theory, he's a tight end and he'll be, used in tight end packages. So they do need wide receiver depth. They lost Jordy Nelson. The other guys that are sitting around there in the depth chart, that Trevor Davis is, they're not going to do anything. So yeah, they need help.
They need tremendous help because over half of their plays on offense are 3 receiver sets.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go back to that depth chart that you just mentioned. We have Adams, Cobb, Allison. So, yeah, I mean, as we stand here today, and there are a few free agent receivers out there, i.e. Dez Bryant. We stand here with Allison as your third guy, and somebody like a Jamon Moore, who's, I think they're going to be putting a lot of pressure on him to step up and play right away. I mean, they have his locker between Cobb and Adams. So, I mean, they're trying to get him with those vets and trying to, soak up all that information and learn the game as quickly as possible. I think there's a huge expectation that he's going to be a big contributor. And the one thing with him, I'll get back to his college career. He had 2 years of 1,000 yards. And I think when you have a 12-game, season,
okay,
that's pretty damn good.
Pretty damn good.
Right. So, and the tape on him that I saw is that he's not real quick, but once he gets the ball in his hands, he's gone.
Yak, yards after the catch.
That's the thing that they're going to value with him is, and I think they
and he's fast, right? Like, I don't know what his 40 time is, but I think it's pretty fast, isn't he?
At the the combine, he ran a 4.6, and then on pro day, he ran a 4.49. So and everybody's been saying that's a little more indicative of who he is.
Oh, I remember a quote from him saying, I'd never run a 4.6 in my life. And he was all, kind of took it to heart and, was like really pissed about it. So,
right.
That tenth of a second can be a huge difference, as we know.
Right. Because, I mean, let's admit, towards the end here, Jordy Nelson was probably running a 4.6 and Cobb's probably running somewhere around there because the quickness just isn't there. But
yeah, Cobb is, he's 28, but he's an old 28. He's been in the league for 8 years, got a lot of mileage, a lot of hits, and he's been injured. And
I think you hit it on the head. I think the mileage has caught up to him. I don't know. It's not like he's been, overused, where he's catching 100 and some balls a year.
Yeah, I think he's been underused personally. And that's, when I say that, I mean that as, the past couple of years, just due to injuries, God forbid Mike McCarthy sometimes devises a scheme to scheme some guys open. Just doesn't necessarily happen. But anyway, that's a different tangent.
Well, that's what I was going to bring up. Like, do you see any hope for changing any of the offense in terms of scheme?
Not to go down, switch gears too much, but it's a good question since we're talking about, the need for wide receivers. And McCarthy used the term, what was it? He said, I'm going to take a scrub brush, and they got, Joe Philbin coming in. I think if anything, we'll see tweaks. They're not going to go out there and he's not going to be Bill Belichick and switching up the game plan week by week. If anything, they might do some different looks here and there. They said they're going to change up some of the terminology, but Aaron Rodgers, that's the other thing. Aaron Rodgers knows this offense so well to completely change it up at this point in his career would probably do more harm than good. So I guess that scrub brush approach that Mike McCarthy used, we'll have to see what that means. Now, this is the best. Jimmy Graham is the best tight end Aaron Rodgers ever had. He's better than even Jermichael Finley. Now he's a little bit older, but he's still, even right now, he's the best tight end he's ever had. So let's hope, McCarthy can design some packages to get him going. But I look at it too, like, guys like McCarthy it was disastrous how he misused, Ty Montgomery. They make him a full-time running back. That guy would have been a threat leaking out of the backfield as a pass catching guy, but he never really did it. You never saw it. You saw him line him up in the I formation and pound it when that guy couldn't do it. Little things like that. He wasn't Darren Sproles, but there's ways you can find these guys to make a difference. So I don't know. We'll see. I think we're just going to see little tweaks. I don't think we're going to see anything crazy.
I think you're on point. The one thing I'll say about Philbin is I don't think that they, in years past before Philbin left, they always seem to do really well after halftime, because I think he saw the tendencies that defenses were playing and would kind of give McCarthy, hey, whatever.
You mean he would adjust?
Oh, yes, that's a famous word around here.
Isn't that? That's an interesting term that not a lot of people use, and Dom Capers certainly never used it.
Right. So I think that's where he's going to really, play a big role, is being able to see the whole game, because I just don't see McCarthy seeing the whole game. I think he's an aggressive play caller. I mean, people say that he's really conservative and all of that kind of stuff, and I just totally disagree with that, because you can't take what happened last year with Hundley and say that he's not aggressive. He just didn't have confidence in Hundley.
I agree with you. So I think to your point, Elliot, that kind of remains to be seen. If there's a lot of big wrinkles and changes, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, I'm hopeful,
But they also, the other thing they have too that they haven't had is, again, if healthy, Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams as a running back duo, man, I mean, if Aaron Jones could stay healthy, he's a real deal. He's got speed. He's got elusiveness. That's the best back Aaron Rodgers has had, so it could be interesting. Next guy, and I know nothing about this guy, Cole Madison, offensive lineman out of Washington State. I'm not even, is he a tackle? Is he a guard? I can't even honestly remember. Now, they needed an offensive lineman. I mean, and if you think about it, they need tackle more than anything, because Brian Bulaga tore his ACL. He's probably not going to be ready even for the start of regular season. So right now they're perilously thin there. You got any light you can shed on Cole Madison, if anything, Jeremy?
Yeah, I mean, they're gonna probably push him inside and start him out at guard, most likely right guard, because
did he play tackle in college?
39 out of the 47 games he played right tackle. So that's where he's been.
But they're going to move him to guard?
Well, yeah, we get back to that movement.
Packers love to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, they do. But, he seems like he's very he could be interchangeable. I mean, he's probably got better feet as a tackle, but you put him inside on guard and he still can hold up there. I'm not really understanding the philosophy that you're going to move another guy out of a position that he's never really played in his career, but they feel confident that he can do it. And he came from it was a very fast-paced offense in Washington State where they were just passing the ball literally, all the time. And so they were pass blocking a lot. And I think in his career, he gave up less than, was it like 8 or 9 sacks or something like that? And they passed the ball. I forgot how much, but I mean, they passed the ball a lot. So his pass blocking is very, very solid. He needs to strengthen up. He needs to get a little bit stronger to hold up against, the guys like Linval Joseph from Minnesota and Sheldon Richardson and stuff like that. But, the skills are there. And I think Campen does a really good job with the guys that he's given. And
yeah, I think Campen's pretty underrated, actually.
Right. I totally agree with you.
The other thing the Packers are really good at when it comes to offensive linemen is drafting really good linemen, mid-rounds. If you look at their track record, they found Lindsley in the 5th round. They found Josh Sitton, I think, in the 4th round. They found Bakhtiari, I think, in the 4th or 5th round. I mean, they are really good at finding good offensive linemen in those later rounds. So, I mean, that was under Ted as the primary GM, but you got to think that they'll still kind of hopefully pull that forward. So, okay. The next guy, J.K. Scott, punter. Yes, punter. When this pick happened, I almost thought it was a typo at first. There's Lassie, or there's Timmy falling in the well again. But I had visions of B.J. Sander going through my head. Packer fans out there know who B.J. Sander was. He was basically a punter that I think Sherman he traded up to get him in the 3rd round, and then it turned out he couldn't punt a football. So. I'll say this, that's all I can say about this pick. If you're going to draft a punter, anything higher than I would say a 7th round pick, he better be damn good. And all indications are this guy was the best punter in the country. He played at Alabama in a pressure cooker in national championship games. He's tall, he's athletic. Outside of that, I mean, what else can you say about drafting a punter, Yeah.
I view punting as fail. So I was done. I didn't care at all about anything about this draft once I heard that.
It's interesting. I will say, what's interesting too, though, when you say that, Jeremy and I went back and forth on this in some Facebook messaging. And again, this is kind of extrapolating out, and you could say it's tinfoil hat type stuff, but the way the league is headed, and I think we can all agree with this, kickoffs and punt returns and things like that, they're going the way of the dodo bird. Kind of me grasping at straws trying to figure out, but the Packers have never been sound on special teams wise, whether it's, holding, kicking, punting. I mean, Crosby's pretty good, but where I'm going with this is if they got out in front of the curve, and if directional punting and coffin corner kicking and field position is going to become that much more important because they're taking away returns and the kicking is going away, this could be a pretty good pick. That's a big if though, because may not go out that way, but who knows? Well,
and who knows how many years that'll be too.
Yeah, I mean, it could be 1 year, it could be 5 years. Who the heck knows? But I do know this. Like I just said, the Packers have, under Mike McCarthy, I don't quite understand this. He's always treated special teams as like a necessary evil. They've never been a strong suit. They've never put an emphasis on it. And then, I wrote a blog on this. You guys saw that. And that was, hopefully the special teams will be great. And what I did was, after this draft, using a draft pick on the long snapper in the 7th round and then this 5th round pick punter, I just compared special teams stats, I think the past 5 years of the New England Patriots, which, they're the best of the best, but they're known for Brady and having pretty good defense, maybe not special teams, versus the Packers. And the average ending ranking for the Packers and special teams the past 5 years was, I think, 20 or 21. And the average for Belichick and the Patriots, I think, was top 5. So Belichick, he has always treated special teams as very, very important. And I think there's something to that. He doesn't just treat it as a thing. It can be game-changing plays here and there, and it's kind of the devil's in the details type thing. And McCarthy, again, Crosby's a good kicker, and he's making too much money, I think. And they've never had a really good punter. They've had horrible return, units, and their gun. Jeff Janis was a great gunner, all that, yay. But I mean, look at some of the big special teams fail. The biggest one you can think of is the fake field goal in the NFC Championship game, against Seattle in that big meltdown. It's just. And Zook, I'm not a huge fan of Ron Zook. I don't know what that hire doesn't do much for me. So hopefully, maybe this is Gutekunst passive aggressively saying, look, I'm going to make our special teams better, period, end of story. And the long snapper thing, which we'll get to, it's a 7th round pick, but still it applies. They had horrible issues with holding and stuff like that last year. It was like Keystone Cops. So right, wrong, or indifferent, Gutekunst, I hope, is saying, enough of this crap. We need to use it as an asset. Again, that's all I got. Because, yeah, they're not sexy picks by any means.
No, you're right. And I think we all had the same. I think I messaged every one of you when they picked Scott, and I think we all pretty much said we're giving up. But, thinking back on it and kind of looking over the whole. And I think when you brought up the blog and you talked about how the Patriots have just been one of the better special teams teams out there. I mean, in today's game, everybody emulates what somebody else does that they just succeed at.
Yeah, it's a copycat league. If something succeeds, everybody copies.
Right. So, and the league has changed in that respect. And I mean, we could go back many games and, pick about the special teams and how they've lost games. And I think they're changing their philosophy this year. I mean, how many times would they go back to Brett Good?
Oh God, yeah.
And now they draft somebody who's played all 4 years as a long snapper. So, they must see something in him that he can be the next Brett Good and be, good for like that 10 years, 12 years. I mean, those long snappers last a long time. So
I hear you. We've talked about long snappers long enough, huh? But I hear you. So that's in the 7th round pick. Next pick that we got coming up, Marquez Valdez-Scantling out of South Florida, wide receiver. Don't know much of anything about this guy. Apparently he's got speed. But other than that, I mean, he didn't go to a very big school. I don't know what you got, Jeremy. Another receiver is kind of what I looked at it as.
Right. And I think where they targeted this year was getting receivers that could make plays down the field. And all 3 of
speed.
Right. Jamon Moore is a guy that can make plays down the field. And Valdez-Scantling is another guy that can make plays down the field. And we'll get into the next receiver then. But I mean, these guys, they're something that we haven't had there for years. Thinking back.
Yeah, we haven't had a burner. When was the last burner wide receiver we had that we actually used? Don't say Jeff Janis. He doesn't count.
No, I think Javon Walker was supposed to be that guy, but we all know how he failed.
I think you're right. He might have been the fastest wide receiver that we've had. And before that, it was What, Don Beebe? I mean, you know what I mean? A guy who's really fast who can actually make a play. They haven't had a burner. They've had guys who are great football players and great wide receivers, just tacticians, but not burners.
Right.
Okay. I don't know if there's anything else there. We can move on to the next, because the next one's another wide receiver. Equanimous St. Brown. What a great name. Wide receiver out of Notre Dame. 6th-round pick. The only thing I know about this guy is apparently his dad is he's kind of like a Lonzo Ball, the guy from the Lakers, that crazy dad. There's like the dad of St. Brown is kind of like that from all things I've heard and read. But St. Brown is he's a specimen. He's fast. He's really athletic. But he's also, he's pretty full of himself. And I guess if you have your dad in your ear telling you all that all the time, that's fine and dandy. But that's about all I know about him. He could be a freak athlete kind of a guy. But again, a guy who's a freak athlete who has a bunch of talent and lasts till the 6th round, there's a reason. Right.
And he had a really pedestrian year last year at Notre Dame. And that was after Kaiser left. When Kaiser was there.
And now Kaiser, he has a new reunion with Kaiser.
Right. And when Kaiser was there, he had over 900 yards receiving and I think 7 or 8 TDs. I mean, he was highly productive, made a lot of plays down the field, and another guy that can stretch the field and hopefully, catch the ball. Because I've heard a few rumblings with Valdes-Scantling and Brown that they kind of have questionable hands.
The dropsies. Oh, yeah.
Right. So, I mean, hopefully that doesn't translate here.
I hear you. I think these guys, Equanimous St. Brown in particular, when we're talking about receivers, and to a point, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, I mean, they're drafting them on potential. Because once you get into these rounds, if you don't make the team, you go to practice squad, it's not a complete failure. Now, draft picks need to do well, and, Packers value them, but it's potential, So we'll see. But they got 3 wide receivers, but they're rookies. Some of them are raw. They got speed, but and here's my thing. It's like, who is the guy from the Steelers? Antonio Brown. He was a late round pick, actually. I kept thinking he was like a 4th or 5th round pick, and he's
no, like a 6th rounder.
Was he really?
Yeah.
Okay, I was thinking he was even. Okay, I don't know how long it took for him to latch on, but I can't imagine he did much in his rookie year either. Did he?
I don't think so.
Okay. I mean, it takes time. It's the NFL. You got to be a tactician. But, if one of these guys can turn into something like that, that's obviously outstanding. But even these guys that are great, unless you're a Randy Moss or a Julio Jones, those are the 2 that come to mind. Your first year is, I mean, it's just a blur, because you're swimming, and, and everybody knows if Aaron Rodgers doesn't trust you 100%, you ain't getting the ball. So we shall see. Next guy, this is 7th round pick, defensive end out of California, James Looney. Defensive end, don't know a whole lot about him. He went to Cal, Aaron Rodgers, alma mater. He is Samoan, I think, and I saw some little bit where he said a lot of people tell him he looks like Maui from the movie Moana. That's about all I know about him. Seems like a good dude. He really carried himself well, but that's all I know about him.
Yeah, he's just he didn't really do anything in college. I think they have huge depth concerns in the defensive line. I mean, besides, you got Wilkerson, Daniels, Clark, Lowry, and Montravius Adams, you don't have anybody else. So
that's a good point. They're kind of loaded with the guys that are right up there, but the guys that are depth are pretty hurt. And that's a very good point.
I would say of all the positions on the team, depth-wise, probably the defensive line has the least amount of depth, because let's think back to years past. Daniels has been hurt here and there. Clark was hurt last year. Wilkerson's been relatively healthy in his career, but he's getting up there in age, so we don't know.
Travis Adams didn't do anything. He was hurt in training camp, and then he didn't do squat.
Right.
I forgot he was on the team. It'd be nice if he could contribute this year. That'd be great.
Well, he better, because he was a 3rd rounder last year, and you got to get value from those picks. If you're going to draft them that high, you better get something from them. And,
him and Beagle both had foot injuries like immediately after they got drafted. I remember like the day after the first mini camp with Beagle, he had that foot surgery, and they had to shut him down and put him on the pup.
Yep,
he was a 4th round pick, I think. So
yep.
Okay, the next guy is the long snapper, Hunter Bradley from Mississippi State. I don't think a whole lot has to be said there. I think we kind of touched on it earlier where, the Packers did this, musical chairs dance where they kept going. They bring in another younger, cheaper long snapper. And then they always go back to Brett Good when this guy didn't work out. Brett Good got hurt a couple times, but they kept, crawling back to him. And I think it was just enough of that. So they just said to hell with that, finding stuff off the scrap heap. So we'll draft a guy, 7th round, kind of is what it is. One thing I did hear about him is that he's torn his ACL like twice or 2 or 3 times. I don't know what that means, being a long snapper, but I guess he's a good athlete and yada, yada, yada. And
the way ACLs work is you once you go through it 3 times, you're good.
Oh, okay. 3rd time's a charm.
That's science, medical science.
Okay. Dr. Elliott, PhD. Yeah, I don't want to disparage the guy, but a long snapper is a long snapper. He's a late round pick.
You disparage me constantly, but that's kind of your thing.
I was talking about the long snapper, but yeah, you I disparage all the time. That's just par for the course. Do you have anything to say on that one, Jeremy? Oh, is that me falling down the well, getting pushed down the well? Okay. Nice.
No, the only thing I know about Hunter Bradley is, according to his special teams coach, in the 4 years that he was the long snapper for the team, he did not have one bad snap. That's pretty much all we know. So if he's,
I was going to say, if he had one bad snap, you're out of here. No, I'm kidding. I hear you.
I don't know what constitutes a bad snap. Or
it's funny. I mean, it's considering the fact that we drafted one, you almost learn a little bit more about the position. And long snappers, just so everybody knows, they snap the ball, but they also have to block on special teams. They don't snap the ball and stand there. So they do have to do something else. But other than that, it kind of is what it is. So, yeah, and they were horrible last year. I want to say they had at least 2 or 3 missed extra points because of that crap. They were fumbling. I mean, the holding was a mess. And that's, we didn't discuss it in detail, but Justin Vogel was undrafted punter last year, first year, and he actually broke some Packer records for net punting, I think. But when you look at his stats on the whole, he wasn't that good, He might have, some of the statistics were a little bit misleading. The Packers were horrible at punts inside the 20, the opponent's 20. I think they were last in the league. So, to get some guys in there to make a difference and quit dinking around with it, I guess I'm all for that. It's hard to be against that, All right, so the second 7th round pick and the last pick they made, Kendall Donnerson, outside linebacker from Southeast Missouri State. This was their one pass rushing linebacker that they selected, and they waited all the way until the end of the 7th round. I got to tell you, the biggest surprise of the entire draft was how late they waited to take a pass rusher. That and outside of them drafting a punter as high as they did. But it was a weak class for pass rushers. So this guy's solely on potential. I have heard he's fast as shit, though. I mean, he's like insanely fast. Now, again, it's great to be an athlete like that. You have to be able to play football. But apparently he's an outside linebacker who can run like a 4.4 or like a sub 4.4, just like insanely fast. So I'll tell you what, if this guy can become anything, that speed will help him. That's crazy fast. He could be great on special teams to start.
And I mean, your 7th rounders, typically, I mean, they're guys that you're just hoping and praying they're going to be something. This guy has the physical tools to do it. So
if he makes it, I got to think it's more on special teams. But when I read the speed numbers on him, I'm like, that is absolutely crazy. So I got to imagine that's why they did it. Okay, so that's it for the all the draft picks. I don't know if you guys had any kind of general thoughts on.
That's it. 45 minutes of talking about draft picks. That's all you got?
Oh, there's more to talk about, though, silly.
All right, man. All right.
Well, go ahead and add something in there, Elliot. Let's get we'll get another sound effect. Let's get a sound effect of somebody getting their head chopped off or something. Something from like Walking Dead or something. Nice. Well, let's see. So they had how many picks? They had 12 picks. They traded away what? Did they end at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So they ended up with one less pick. It looks like they had 12 and they used 11. They didn't end up trading up in the first, which that would have been nice, I'll admit. And if they would have taken Ward, that was the guy I would have targeted that they really needed. But I don't know. Now we sit back and we gotta have to wait, for OTAs, training camp and all that, and just pray these guys stay healthy. Okay, Packers organizational stuff as it relates to the draft. So I have here as a note, Andy and Jeremy had quite a back and forth on Facebook Messenger, and I called it kind of a Seinfeld-esque airing of grievances regarding the Packers. And what that kind of means is every now and then, whether it was you, Jeremy, or me, we have our little group in Facebook Messenger with us three, and we just we'll shoot ideas past each other, or just concepts, or just funny stuff, or whatever. But every now and then I'll just have something that really bugs me, and I'll plan it out there, and then we go back and forth. That's usually how I use that kind of stuff. So I took a couple screen caps just to kind of go over some of our thoughts post draft, just about what things are going on. So first one I got here, screen cap, and I'll just read what you got here, kind of go through it. This is Jeremy.
Why don't you reenact it? Let Jeremy read his.
Okay, Jeremy, you reenact it, and use your acting voice. Talked about so many times.
Please.
No, to preface it up, this particular screenshot I got here, we're talking about just changes to the coaching staff, and also how everything kind of goes back to Aaron Rodgers and how much he carries the team. So if you want to, why don't you read through your stuff, and then I'll just kind of highlight through mine. And this one isn't necessarily funny, but it just kind of touches on some of the things we were talking about in real time, and then there's probably some good bits in here.
Yeah, and I mean, we talk about so much, so I'm really fuzzy on the details of what we were talking about here, but I started off and said, it's good to look at the future. You're going to pay number 12 bank, and that's Aaron Rodgers. You bring in a new defensive coordinator, and you give him Wilkerson. On top of that, you're going to protect number 12, which is Aaron again, with another undrafted free agent and a right tackle who can't stay healthy. This is my rationale. We trade for a pick, and we get it next year. We give up a third rounder this year, and we have undrafted free agents we are depending on at right guard, outside linebacker depth, safety to a degree, and wide receiver. I just can't get over that. If we were loaded like the Saints, great move, but we are not loaded.
Yeah, and that's good. So this is kind of like the good cop, bad cop, I guess, for the listeners out there, and what's interesting, and I think you guys could attest to this, usually you guys are the good cop and I'm the bad cop. You guys have to talk me off the ledge. I can be Mr. Negative Town, but I kind of turn the coin on its head here, and I tried to look back at the draft and say, okay, this is Gutekunst's first draft, what's going on here? So I said, what I basically said here in this message was, I've been trying to look at what Goody has done basically to rid the team of Ted Thompson's mistakes. On the surface, not much, but then as I looked at it, realized he did make some big moves. So as everybody knows, Demarius Randall, as it turns out, he was a humongous cancer in the locker room. He was a head case, and he was drafted out of position. There were a lot of things working against that. And I even Ted should have never drafted him, and they probably should have cut him last year after he had his little tirade in the Bear game, and he ended up leaving the stadium or whatever. That's unbelievable. I never heard stories where players leave the stadium in mid-game. So I'll give Gutekunst credit for dumping Randall, even though you don't want to get rid of a first-round pick, 3 years later. And then I say, as trade as it looks, look at the last 3 off seasons with Long Snapper. And then I say they shit the bed with guys and constantly go crawling back to Brett Good. Well, not a huge deal. Gutekunst said, F this, no more. And then while the recent quarterback drafts have been shit for the Packers, much of what Ted did was draft guys who either A, didn't play cornerback in college, or B, pick guys and then change their position. At least Gutekunst drafted 2 guys who played cornerback in college for multiple seasons. And that goes back to the Jair Alexander and Josh Jackson. Ted would draft a lot of athletes, and the Demarius Randalls and the Quentin Rollinses. And this isn't the player's fault. It's Ted's fault for drafting these guys, putting them in bad positions. And then as I touched on, Gutekunst finally drafted a real third down inside linebacker with Burks. Ted screwed that position for the better part of 4 years, So I think, the dynamic that Jeremy and I had going on there was Jeremy was all boo-hoo, and I was all like, It's all roses. So
we flipped roles. We flipped roles.
We flipped roles. And we're going to go back and forth. So the next one we got here, and this is going back to some depth in second-year players. And then we go into, what the Packers and the fandom know when under Ted's regime. He loved his undrafted free agents. We would always find these undrafted free agents, and then, this guy's going to come on this year. This guy's going to come on that year. But we'll get into that. So why don't you pick up where you started here?
Sure. I said it's ridiculous on paper that they're putting all their marbles on Reggie Gilbert and Vince Beagle. Neither have been bona fide pass rushers in their careers. Unless they prove me wrong, fans are going to be very disappointed this year. But Patton is known as a miracle worker, with one caveat. He was a coordinator of two talented defenses in New York and Buffalo. They had a ton more talent than us. There is no comparison. While it is a team's duty to develop players, I'm getting tired of this philosophy. You look at Jacksonville, for example. They loaded on the defensive line. They had Calais Campbell, Yannick, I can't pronounce his last name, Malik Jackson, Dexter Fowler, and Marcel Darius, to name a few. Yet they spend a first-round draft pick on Taven Bryan. I am of the philosophy of you can never have enough talent. Don't settle and pray. Go get the talent.
You bring up a good point there in that, Ted always said we never draft for need. Well, that's bullshit. The past few years, I mean, they weren't drafting best play available. They were drafted for need all over the place because they kept screwing up. So I digress. Go ahead.
Yeah, right. Except maybe for a wide receiver back around 2008, 2011, we never overflow a position with so much talent. Why the not? Way too conservative around here for my liking. They are truly banking on Pettine to turn this defense around. All their marbles are in that basket.
Sure, and this is where I pop in. And what you talk about with Pettine there, it's interesting because people tend to forget that McCarthy. This is his prove it year, and he fired Capers and he brings in Pettine. Now Pettine is basically. His contract is what, 2 years? I can't imagine he signed him to a 1 year contract. I don't know the details of Pettine, but he's tied here with McCarthy. So, if Pettine can't turn this around in 1 year and the Packers flop this year, they're going to clean house on coaching staff, I think. So there's marbles in all the marbles and all the eggs are in one basket for McCarthy and his whole staff to include Pettine. So a lot of pressure. Now, so I get into these are some of the best undrafted free agents that have been really pumped up in training camps in years past, and I'm sure Packer fans are going to remember some of these names. Okay, in no particular order. Here we go. Vic So'oto. You remember this guy? I remember his name, but they were all over him, and he made a big play in like a preseason like family night game, and then he's out of the league. I mean, so that we're littered with this. Desmond Moses. He was supposed to be this great pass rusher that was going to take over for. We lost somebody at some point, but he was going to be an outside linebacker. And, again, more of the same. Nothing ever happened with it. Jaron Elliott, same thing. He was supposed to be an outside, linebacker that was undrafted free agent, do something. Nothing. Torrey Gurley, he was a wide receiver that was supposed to be really big. He blocked a bunch of punts in preseason 1 year. Never did anything. He's probably out of the league. Jared Boykin, he did have one decent season with Rodgers when somebody got hurt and Boykin had to step up. He didn't do gangbusters, but he did okay, filled in. And then in the offseason that year, he's going to bust open. He's going to do great. Nothing. Brandon Bostic. We all know about Brandon Bostic.
No, really? What did he do?
Well, what's funny? I go back to that offseason and into that season. They're like, he could be Jermichael Finley. He's got the athletic ability. Next is all I can say. We know what happened with Brandon Bostic. He fell down the proverbial well and then some. And then this is the guy you're hearing about right now, Kentrell Bryce. Safety, big hitter, blah blah blah. He was supposed to step up last year. Did not much of anything. As a guy. They put all this faith, and to me, it's just about realistic expectations. These guys are undrafted free agents. They should be. The expectations need to be weighted as such. They'll be good special teams players, and they can be backups as their ceiling. That's the way it is. The chances of an undrafted free agent on any team, not just the Packers, becoming an impact player are so minuscule. Does it happen? Yes, it does happen, but it's very rare. And so I can count on one hand the undrafted free agents the Packers have had that turned into anything. They're both cornerbacks, Sam Shields and Tramon Williams. Other than that, they got nothing. And the reason I kind of bring this up is the other guy that they're picking or they're counting on to make a difference is Reggie Gilbert. And he's an outside linebacker that stayed on the practice squad. Now, what was interesting, he came about where, as we know, the defense was absolutely horrible all last year. And Kyler Fackrell's getting all these snaps. He wasn't doing anything. So they bring in Reggie Gilbert, and he looked great. He actually looked really good. And you're like, why the hell has this guy been riding the pine and sitting on the practice squad the whole year and taking snaps away from Kyler Fackrell? One thing you got to remember, the guy had fresh legs. The season was effectively over, so he flashed. That's great. But if they're expecting this guy to come in and become Clay Matthews in his prime, it ain't going to happen. If he can be a serviceable, great. So I'm just cautioning people that this age old thing for the last, 7 or 8 years with undrafted free agents, you have to temper your expectations because the chances of that happening, making a big jump, are just minuscule.
I can't agree with you anymore. I think undrafted free agents in general, like you said, they should be depth fillers. They should be special teams guys and guys that you really aren't depending on to contribute in a big way.
If you're going into next year and you're like, Reggie Gilbert has to get 10 or 11 sacks, you got to be kidding me.
Right. And they're going into this offseason, and that's all I'm reading about is Reggie Gilbert is having a great offseason. Well, he's had 1 sack thus far.
Yeah, and you know what's funny? You're hearing more about Reggie Gilbert than you are about Vince Beagle. That's troubling because Vince Beagle was a 4th-round pick. So that's just 2 little snippets into some back and forth diatribes that we had on our Facebook Messenger. Now we can pop into note here. I got thoughts on how Gutekunst ran the draft. And my kind of question was it more like the same old stuff, i.e. Ted Thompson, or did he sort of break the mold a little bit? Me, I think it was kind of both. He did some Ted things, but he also broke the mold a little bit. What do you guys think?
I think the trade down was a Ted Thompson type move. I mean, that just had Ted Thompson screamed all over it, because now we're looking at a 2019 first-round draft pick, future again, when we were 7-9 last year, missed the playoffs.
Yeah, that did reek of Ted. Yeah.
Right. So the players in general that they drafted, I think those guys really were not guys that Ted would have drafted. They just don't fit that mold, because these guys have all specialized in positions that they're going to be playing here, except for maybe Cole Madison. But, Josh Jackson does not seem like a guy that Ted would have picked. Jair Alexander doesn't seem like a guy that he would have picked. And we can go on the list of guys that they drafted. And
yeah, Ted seemed to, draft, and might seem to draft more just athlete, but not great proven football player. And to your point, you said kind of specialist, it's like, and that, in the NFL, I've often said, if you don't have a set position in the NFL, you're doomed.
Right.
If you're a guy who's kind of, you could be a tweener, as they call it. If you're a tweener guy, if you're in between an outside linebacker and a defensive end, or if you're not quite a guard, you're doomed. You're not going to make it.
Right. I mean, how long has it taken Nick Perry to develop into something?
I feel bad for that guy because he screams and should have always been a 4-3 defensive end.
Right.
I mean, that was just ridiculous, but he's ours now. So
yep.
Yeah. So that's my take. I think it was kind of both, and it's probably going to take really next year to see what the heck happens. One draft does not make a guy, but it did seem to have both. So we already kind of touched on this, but I have here as another bullet. Jeremy was not pleased when Gutekunst traded out of the 14th pick. We've kind of hit that where, I tend to think, I wasn't a huge fan of it, but getting a first-round pick, God, that would be hard to pass up. So I get that, but I think we can probably just put that one to bed.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah. Will do, sir. I'll strike it from the record. Strike that, stenographer. The pick of a punter in round 5 and a long snapper, we kind of hit on that too. On the head scratchers, when you draft 2 special teams players in one draft, it's kind of odd. And that's why it kind of made the impetus for me to write that blog, thinking maybe, well, if you're spending draft picks on special teams guys and some of these lesser known positions, my only thought is maybe Gutekunst is saying, look, enough of this crap. We're not going to have a middling punter and, guys who can't hold the ball. That's really all I got.
Right. I agree.
Okay, so, and then the next one here, you'll have to click on it for a link within the notes we have, but the Packers front office brain drain continues. They have another scout to the New York Jets. His name escapes me, but he's a veteran scout. Brian Gutekunst to the losing personnel department.
Dotson.
Let's see.
I think it was DeMar Dotson.
Alonzo Dotson. So I don't know who the hell is left in that room in terms of scouts working under Gutekunst. I think after the draft, his number one priority has got to get some more talent in the scouting department and in the front office area replenished, because they have, between losing Elliot Wolf, John Schneider, McKenzie over all the years, Dorsey, all these guys. I mean, they are bereft of qualified scouting talent. And Ted really did nothing to replace these guys. Well, they would leave, and he reassigned people. So the brain drain is real, and they need to replenish that.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't know. How do you know that?
How do I know that they should do that? Or how do I know that they're not replacing?
I mean, I guess we know that they're not replacing right away, but how do you know that that's bad?
Well, I mean, it's more or less a philosophy, I guess. But if you do look at, let's go back to 2010. So I think, was it right after the Super Bowl? What year did John Schneider become the GM of the Seahawks? Was it right after the Packers won the Super Bowl, or was it before?
I thought it was 2011, right after we won.
Okay. So Schneider, he was a really good scout, and he's proven himself. He's a good GM. He moved up and was a good GM. McKenzie, and those were 2 high up guys. And right around that time, this is when, I use this as my ammunition to say this is when the drafts, and this is when Ted started to go downhill. Ted did great prior to from 2005 and through 2011, the season after the Super Bowl. He did really well with building the roster. 2011, when guys started to leave the front office, that's when shit went downhill, and they lost talent. And they lost. When I say talent, I mean they lost talent on the team, but they also lost scouts that did that because they went. That McKenzie goes to the Raiders and Schneider goes to the Seahawks, and then Dorsey leaves and goes to the Chiefs, and he never replaced those. The quality of the draft suffered. So that to me, he didn't have as good as scouts too, and you can't do all that yourself.
Right, but that wasn't really super recent. And so some of these guys that are more recent, maybe they're part of the problem.
It's an interesting thought. I don't like a guy like Elliot Wolf. Who knows? We're going to have to wait on him because he's with Dorsey and with Alonzo Highsmith in Cleveland. So we'll have to kind of see how that goes. But I tend to think that losing Dorsey and for sure losing Schneider, that hurt Ted. I really think it did. I think it hurt the drafts, and it hurt just the evaluation of talent. Other guys
I think that's very visible, like in hindsight. But I mean, I don't know. I don't know how we could get really much worse.
Well, I think the thing was he didn't replace them. He didn't go out and find more veteran scouts. He just reassigned younger guys or whatnot within the organization. I think it should have probably been, in my opinion, should have been dealt with, at that time to get somebody and replenish it. Maybe not just like move, take the workload and move it over guys because maybe some other guys got overwhelmed. Again. It's somewhat unknown, but they have lost a lot of guys. I think they need to start restocking that. So
yeah,
let's hope. I mean, Ted didn't. That's the thing. Ted never did. They left and he never replaced him, which was kind of odd. It's such an odd. I mean, look, they bring in a new defensive coordinator. They get rid of the GM and he gets reassigned. So it's like Ted's still in the building. They still have the same head coach, but they hire the defensive coordinator. It's like they changed this, but they didn't change that. There's these weird. I've heard comments from certain players, after Dom Capers gets let go, they talk about accountability and this, that, or the other. And, Tramon Williams came out and said that the league figured out Capers like 6 or 7 years ago, right? And I'm going, the guy who was responsible for allowing it to happen is still here. And they're publicly saying this, So I'm kind of looking at if you're gonna dump Ted, you need to dump Mike, And that's not to say I'm not I think Mike's a pretty good coach, but it was time. And they got rid of some of the pieces, but not all, And Ted's still in the building and they didn't purge that. And it's just kind of this odd thing. They kind of reshuffled some things.
It's hard, when you're like, when things are almost working, it's hard to dump it all. So, I mean, I see both ways.
Yeah, I agree. I guess I do too. I mean, I think Ted should have just, McCarthy. Yeah, maybe I could see him sticking around, but Ted reassigning him as like head scout. I don't know. But I mean, that's up for debate. Yeah. So I guess that's up to debate for anybody, but it was just odd that they didn't do a clean purge. They did like a half purge, It's almost like you have this manager in an office and it's like, well, we're going to get rid of him, but we're going to keep his underling in the secretary. Well, why? Okay. So last thing I got here as a topic is the NFC North teams in the overall draft. I mean, obviously we follow the Packers. I don't follow much of anything else, but I did a little bit of research on some of the other teams and what they took. And I figure we could talk about some of that. First up here, Chicago Bears. They drafted a player I really liked. That is, for everybody out there, that is a bear, apparently.
A baby bear.
Okay. A cub.
Hey, you know what? I wanted royalty-free sound samples. You just deal with it, all right? They're going to get worse.
No worries. I mean, I hate all these teams anyway, as we know, because, I mean, if you're a Packer fan, these other teams really don't matter. But we should talk about it because they're the main competition. So Roquan Smith, inside linebacker from UGA, the number 9 overall pick the Bears took. He's a really good player. As you guys know, I'm a big UGA fan. I went there for a bit, and I watched the national championship game against Alabama. It was the worst loss of any sporting event I've ever seen, and that includes Packer games that I've seen. Without getting into that, he's going to be a force. He's going to be really good. He kind of reminded me of, I don't want to say he's like the guy from the Ravens. He's not Ray Lewis, but he's a game-changing inside linebacker, and that was a good pick. And, kind of quietly here, I put the Bears are building another young, up-and-coming defense. And, Trubisky had one good year, and their offense has some work, but I think the Bears are definitely on the right track. They're not there yet, but I think they're definitely, they got their shit together finally.
Right. And I think just adding to that, they had the 10th overall defense last year. So now they're adding Roquan Smith.
Yeah.
I mean, and middle linebacker was their weakness. And that defense is predicated on a middle linebacker just causing all this ruckus. And this is a guy that can do that.
That's what I was thinking. If he fell, the Packers should have snagged him.
Right. When the Bears were getting up to 8th, I was just sitting there crossing my fingers that they weren't going to pick him, because I thought if they were going to, bypass him and take somebody else, the Packers need to get him.
So that was a good pick. I don't know if you have any other thoughts about the Bears in general, but I think they're still a couple years out, but they're doing all the right things.
Yeah, and they picked up a center from Iowa in the second round and a receiver that's an underrated receiver from Memphis, Anthony Miller, who's supposed to be really dynamic. So, I mean, the first 3 picks, I don't know the last 4 picks, but the first 3 picks were very, very good college players.
Okay. I don't know who their GM is, his name, but I think, is it Gase?
Ryan Pace.
Pace, okay. But, they canned, what's his name, John Fox. I was never a big fan of him anyway, but I don't even know how much success he was set up to have anyway. But yeah, I think in a couple of years, the Bears are going to be a real, if Trubisky keeps, getting pretty good, I think they'll be a force. So that's that. Now you'll love my next quote about the Detroit Lions. The Lions remind me of the Milwaukee Bucks. They always seem to have preseason hype and expectations and always fall short. That's all I got I don't know. The Lions drafted a center in round 1. I mean, that's all I can say about the Lions. They're just perennially mediocre. And I mean, Stafford, I think, is okay, but the Lions are Lions. I don't know what else
Right. And there's been significant turnover in that organization. I mean, as you know, they fired.
Oh God, that's right. They got that new coach who's like the sexual assault thing. Like, I was acquitted, but it came out. The Patriot assistant, what's his name?
Yeah, Matt Patricia. And their GM is an old Patriot guy.
Patricia, that's right. God, what's the over under on him resigning? Even if he was acquitted and all that.
Nothing.
Well, yeah, he was acquitted.
Right.
I know. It's just a different climate. That's the weird thing. I almost forgot that happened. So Lions are Lions. Okay, so the biggest threat in the North, and I think they're going to be, until proven otherwise, the Vikings. They drafted a cornerback out of UCF, 30th overall pick. They signed Kirk Cousins. I'm not a fan of Kirk Cousins, but he's never really had a great team around him. He's got a great team around him now. He's got good wide receivers. So, if this is the team or the year for him to actually show something, this could be it. The thing about the Vikings defense is I don't really know what they are, because they look really darn good. And then they got absolutely annihilated in the NFC Championship game against the Eagles. I couldn't believe how horrible they looked.
Because they're really not that good.
They played well against every other. I mean, they were a really good defense up until that game, and then they got annihilated. I don't really know how good their defense really is, and maybe Doug Peterson is just that dynamic of a play caller, or maybe I think part of it too is they're a dome team, and they went on the road outside, and that's some of it, but not all of it. But man, they looked lost. For a Mike Zimmer coach team, I was stunned when I saw that.
Yeah, they picked a bad time to lay an egg.
They picked a bad time to shit the bed, no doubt.
I have a Viking sample, and then I think we can just about call it quits, right?
That's Norse for pants on the ground, right?
No, it's way worse than that. So I won't go into the swear words that it represents, but it's a drunk guy in Norway swearing at the cops
while he's drinking
basically.
mead, right?
I don't know how to speak Norwegian, but it sounded very appropriate for the Vikings. So there you go.
Oh, that'll work. That works for me.
I worked really hard at that.
Outstanding. Checks in the mail, Elliot.
Oh, phew. I got it.
Cool. Well, I think that does it, boys, and Absolute Packer podcast fans. So
podcast.
Chair. I know, right?